Dante and Nero are at it again, fighting demons, saving the world. The regular, usual fare for the two gentlemen who are, in fact, somehow related to demons. Is this game any fun? Is this game good? Well, you really need to ask the right person. And I'll be honest, I don't think I am. For me, I do not think it's really worth. Saying worth a damn is an interesting way to phrase it. I think it's worth a damn if you are certainly someone into the anime fare. I will certainly say if you're a massive fan of the original series, it is a phenomenal experience, and the graphical fidelity here on display, even with the age of the game, is really impressive. But for my sensibilities, for the type of combat, for the kind of experience, for the level of challenge and the way the combat flows, no. No, I'm grateful that I bought it on sale, and I never paid full price, because if I'd paid full price, I probably would not have felt satisfaction for my dollar. So what is Devil May Cry? Devil May Cry is essentially an action combat game that's made by Capcom. You play as three protagonists: Nero, Dante, and a new character named V, who each individually play very uniquely. They're tasked with having to take down this great big bad demon who's now obviously manifested a specific location in the world. And the story kind of plays across a series of weeks, mainly a couple of days, but will go back and forth as the story kind of unfolds and you start to uncover what the deeper kind of secrets of certain characters, motivations, and who this big bad actually is. So there's a couple of little spoilery bits that I will avoid, but there's nothing out of the ordinary here. I think the way the story is structured, if you're privy to the universe and you understand who these characters are, you'll pick it up pretty quickly. If you're not, it might be a nice surprise. And there are some fun little roller coaster moments, as you're kind of seeing in the background here. Visually, this game is just stunning. I gotta admit, the Capcom and their design team and their cinematics team just understand how these characters need to look and feel. So there's no denying that there is a style and a flair to how everything kind of comes together, how everything is expressed, even down to the combat itself when you're kind of playing as these three characters, as they each play individually. Very, very unique. You do have a fourth character. If you do get the special edition, you've also got the Dante's brother Virgil as a playable character, though honestly, it's kind of a, if you feel like going through the campaign again as Virgil with his unique moveset, that is entirely up to you. I don't feel that it's necessarily worth the time and investment, but if you want more of this game, it is more value for money. And there is certainly a lot there. There's a lot of extra little modes and mechanics that they put in. So, how does the game essentially play? Third person action game. You have very unique kind of combos that you're unlocking and learning for each of the characters. Nero, missing his hand, has a mechanic where he's essentially collecting these mechanical arms that have individual different types of powers. Sometimes they might shoot out missiles, sometimes they allow you to kind of ride on them, sometimes there'll be electric shocks, and you can at any point in time use these arms during combat, or if you're in a tight pinch and you need to do some explosive damage, you can actually just blow them up. But they function as an actual usable item. So once you use it, that's it, it's gone. You need to go find another item or buy it from the shop when you get to the specific locations. You obviously do the regular kind of rigmarole like in the previous games, where you're collecting red orbs to build up XP to level up your character and get new abilities, new move sets, new combos. And that goes for any of the weapons that you might unlock. So with Nero, it's literally just his sword and his arm. With someone like Dante, who has a variety of weapons that he will unlock through the course of the game up until almost the last act, which is kind of weird. He's got a whole plethora of different combat styles that then complement the different weapons that you have. So you've got your melee and your long range, and there's a whole host for Dante. So you've got your regular kind of your pistols, your shotgun, you've even got a bazooka in there. And then his melee weapons are things like his sword, he's got his fisticuffs. I don't remember the freaking name of these things. I should have written it down. But suffice it to say, there is a variety of different types of weapons that you have for someone like Dante. He's probably the most varied and in-depth character that you can play with, because on top of his many layers or many levels of weapons that is on offer here, he also has the classic 4 styles of play that you can change on the go between Trickster, which allows you to dodge and weave through the enemies or through the actual battlefield. You've got Royal Guard, which is kind of your defensive and allows you to counterattack. And then you've got, I think it's Sword Master and then Gun Master. So your Gun Master will have a few extra moves related to your pistol, and then your Sword Master will be related to your actual sword or your like arms. So there's a few extra moves there. And then you have the new and up and coming character, V. V is very much a summoner. He's got essentially 2 attacks that are linked to 2 very specific animals. He does have a third summon, which is linked to his Devil Trigger. And the Devil Trigger is essentially like your special move. You have a specials bar that builds up over time that you can then unleash this devastating series of attacks. And it usually empowers the characters. For V, though, it creates a new summon on the field. So he's long range summon is a bird, which acts as a not just a long range kind of attacker, but also is pulling you in and around the battle. So he is very vital to your mobility on the field. You've also got like a panther, this black panther that acts as his melee attacker. And then you've got a large golem type summon that is only unlocked or only comes out when you use your Devil Trigger. Summons themselves are an interesting mechanic because, of course, you're now not kind of in the midst of combat. You're kind of, at a distance when you're dealing with these bosses. So it changes the dynamic a bit and is quite refreshing for the series. The catch is, obviously, with him being so far is that his actual summons can take damage. So if they do take enough damage, they will kind of be timed out, and you either need to stand nearby or you need to wait for them to regenerate so that you can pull them back into combat. So there's this real nice strategy to how you use V and all his various kind of tactics and abilities. And the 3 characters, along with Virgil, if you choose to unlock him, obviously offer a nice variety of combat styles. Though their issue that I have with this game, especially with comparing it to a lot of modern action games, there is something about the feel of this that it is more emblematic of something like a combat game, like a Street Fighter or something like a standard fighting game, essentially. There isn't this well-designed pacing of moving in towards the enemy, and it might have something to do with the fact that the way you're tracking your enemies and the way you pull off some of these more unique and flashy moves, you need to use the lock-on. And the lock-on, unfortunately, does mean that you don't have the same mobility on the field. So when you're wanting to just move around, you need to obviously not lock on to anything. It is a manual lock-on. It's not an automatic lock-on like a lot of FromSoft kind of action players would be used to. But the moment you want to use any of those abilities, you now need to manually lock on to an enemy. And I don't feel that the lock-on itself works very well, especially when combat gets very chaotic and hectic. It can be very tough at times, along with the camera fighting you at certain points when you get too close to a wall, for the monsters to kind of close in on you and not give you any breathing room. And if you've got that lock on, which you would also need for dodging purposes at times, it doesn't make it easier to get out of the way. So it is very challenging and very difficult if you're not used to this style of gameplay. I actually found it more infuriating, especially at the end parts of the game, and more so with a character like Nero, because he doesn't have, though he does have an ability to pull himself towards enemies that is useful, but a lot of his combat flair is really related to his glove, and I don't feel that there is enough there and enough variety in what he has on offer to make him an interesting character to play as. I think by far the best out of the three is going to be Dante, followed by V, in my opinion. Unless you're someone who doesn't like playing a summoner class, then sure, you'll probably find someone like Nero being a high second, with V being a third enjoyable character. It's fine. Like, for my sensibilities, it's not exactly the action game that, or the style of action game that I like. It's missing this sensation or this kind of free form movement, which allows me to just move in and engage with the enemy. There is something stiff about how the character kind of moves around the field. When you're fighting and when you've got the combos down and you're getting them right, there is a nice flow, but it can be very difficult to pull that off. And it doesn't, some of the moves, especially with a character like Nero, doesn't necessarily transition smoothly from one move set to another. And then you might find with someone like V, who, because you're not now engaged in the combat, you're having to watch, you might not be necessarily familiar with or understand what the actual attacks are because they're happening at a distance, and you might be focused on an enemy that's to the side of you or behind you. So there is definitely a high level of challenge. There is certainly a high level of learning that's required in order to master the systems. They're simple enough to pull off, but to get them right, to get the satisfaction and the sensation of this growth in the game and this feeling of I'm actually overcoming these challenges and I'm learning the mechanics and I'm learning to adapt to the situations and figure out the little puzzles that the game offers, I don't feel is rewarding enough for my kind of taste. But for someone who enjoys this style of game, you will probably feel quite the opposite. And there is obviously a lot there if you're into that. From a further gameplay standpoint, there is platforming, and honestly, it's kind of a joke. The platforming in this game, even when there's the secret missions that are on offer here that allow you the ability to do these unique little challenges. It might be, hey, deal with these enemies in a very specific way, or finish off this amount of enemies in X amount of time. But then you get the platforming ones, which will be, hey, use this character to get to the blue orb and not hit the floor. And you get a really tight space in which to figure out that you need to allow the character to run, because there isn't just a run button. You have to warm them up to actually get into a sprint, which is one of my other frustrating things with this game. You're then having to repeat this whole little mission every single time and reload it every single time something goes wrong, which is this whole long process. It's not really fast and responsive. It doesn't allow you to just jump back in and repeat it and kind of go, no, you screwed up, try again. No, you screwed up, try again. You're having to keep loading this little secret mission every single time in order to try and pull it off. It's just not fun platforming. It's just one of those mechanics that just feels unnecessary. It has existed in the series for a long time, but it's never really had any serious work done. And the moments where the game does actually have some platforming, it's just not satisfying and fun. It's kind of there for the sake of adding a little bit of extra depth to the kind of scenery that you're exploring. And speaking of scenery, a lot of it does get very rinse and repeaty. There isn't the variety that you'd probably get in many other Capcom games. usually going down the same type of drab corridor. There is the occasional moment that you might have some unique Gothic architecture that you have to kind of go through, or interesting city locale at the beginning. But then for the most part, you're kind of going through what feels like the demon stage or the hell stage of Diablo 3. It's just all of this really kind of bloody, gory, kind of, again, demonic looking level design. And it's all just reds and pinks and blues. It's quite disappointing, honestly, when you compare it to some of the previous games that have honestly offered a lot more in the way of the variety to the level design. This game just doesn't have a nice mixture. Story-wise, it's fine. There's nothing really that amazing about the story. It is a bunch of characters going off to save the world again, dealing with, the demon threat and trying to figure out what the threat is, how to dispose of it, and what the secret MacGuffin that's required in order to deal with them. It's fine. So, yeah, is it worth a damn? If you're someone who's a big fan of the series, if you're someone who likes this kind of anime style craziness in combat, in characters, I will say the characters' personalities are amazing and they are fun, and the writing is pretty solid for the most part. I really can't complain from the moment to moment action set pieces, but playing the game, there are certainly some very frustrating moments. And because of the lack of proper checkpointing, if you screw up, you do have to go back a decent section. And that's not to say that there aren't ways to mitigate the difficulty. There's a lot of accessibility that has been added by Capcom into this game compared to previous titles. Between the yellow orbs that you have that allow you to essentially restart or continue from where you're at with a boss battle or an encounter with full health, you also can sacrifice your red orbs. But if you don't have any red orbs, you're kind of screwed there, so that's no longer an option. Granted, provided you're, respectful with how you use the orbs, you'll usually have enough in order to either replenish your health by either 3 bars, or you can do like half of your health bar. And I think there's a third option there that I noticed that not only gives you health, but also does some extra damage to the enemy. So that's something to keep in mind that I didn't realize until the very end. And then on top of that, you've also got the various difficulty modifiers that you can adjust, I believe, on the go. So, like I said, there is certainly a freedom to make the game easier, but from a normal difficulty, it can really bust your balls, especially when certain enemies just gang up on you and you don't have a really smooth, easy time with the dodging, because the dodging isn't really a wide dodge. You don't necessarily have the same kind of iframes that you would in a Souls-like game. It's very tight. It's almost closer to like a Sekiro in that sense, but at least Sekiro had a really good block system and much better combat, in my opinion, and a lot more freeform to the movement compared to this, where I feel stiff and kind of locked in place unless I'm not locking on, which is kind of required to even do some of the combos. So, on sale for myself and for people that might find this kind of game to be a little bit too extreme. It's a fun kind of pickup. I don't think it's worth a full price tag. And honestly, it kind of concerns me, considering the fact that we've had games like Bayonetta that I believe, from memory, has done a better job of modernizing this style of action game. I really hope that if they do ever make a sequel to this, that they really kind of look at the movement system and implement it in a better sense. And I know people have had their contention with the DMC game made by Ninja Theory, but honestly, from memory, that was a far better feeling style of game that had a better flow to your movement as well as the combat. This game really excels at the combat, but doesn't necessarily excel at the movement aspect of moving through the level, moving through the space, moving from enemy to enemy. There isn't a kind of flow and an easy kind of glide. It just feels very stiff and locked in place. It almost asks the player to play the game like it's a turn-based. Again, it's like I said, it is closer to a fighting game. You're having to pull off very specific moves in very specific timings in order to get the most out of it. And if you're not pressing the exact button at the exact time, especially when the game gets pretty frantic, you will lose yourself and you will not be pulling off stylish kind of acrobatics, was the word I was looking for. But I guess if you stick to it, if you work on the systems, you understand and play with what is there mechanically, boy, I can almost see behind a really pro gamer who wants to really get into the meat of it, they can pull off some really cool movesets and they can make this game look smashing. So those are my thoughts. Tell me what you think. Share your thoughts, share your feelings. Tell me your experiences with this game or other Devil May Cry games and what your history is with the series and where you'd like to see this franchise go from here. So, until next time.